And joining me now in a very busy week, so we appreciate the time, Mississippi's 3rd District Congressman Representative Michael Guest. How you doing, Rep?
I'm great, Dave. Appreciate you and Rhino for letting me come on for a few minutes today.
Oh, definitely. Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, and I want to get to the stuff that's in all the national news in a minute. First, let's focus on the big thing. You made a trip to Meridian. There's something really cool that could be happening in Meridian, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So Monday when I was back in Mississippi, went to Meridian. We met with many of our military officials, community leaders, elected leaders. We were actually there at Keyfield on the air base there of the 186th Air Refueling Wing. And what we were trying to do is make sure that we were having dialogue with those individuals about what the congressional delegation was doing to position Meridian to be home of the next tanker. So the 186 flies the KC-135. It's an air refueler, but it is an aging platform. We got a chance to tour and go on some of the planes there. One of the planes that we saw was actually manufactured in 1959. So
wow.
6+ decades of service to our military. Now, I will tell you that the men and women of the 186 do a great job of maintenance on that plane. A lot of the electronics, the engines have been replaced over the years, but an aging platform. The Air Force is about to roll out to the National Guard. These planes are already being flown by active duty, but to the National Guard, the next generation of tankers, the KC-46As, and Meridian will be one of the bases that will be competing to house that new platform. Currently, there are 16 National Guard bases that fly the older KC-135s. All 16 of those bases will be in consideration for the 16 planes that will be rolling out, and 2 of those 16 bases will each get 8 planes. And so we want to make sure as a congressional delegation, whether it be myself, Representative Kelly Ezel Thompson, and our 2 U.S. Senators, Cindy Hyde-Smith and Roger Wicker, that we're working with the people at Meridian to make us competitive, because I think that Meridian is the proper home for that. You know, air refueling was pioneered there in Meridian at Keyfield. We have had that mission there for a number of years, and the criteria that we believe the Air Force is going to look at, Meridian is going to rank in the top 5% of all the criteria that is going to be considered. And so it's important that we keep that mission there and that we bring these new refuelers to Meridian so that that mission can continue for 6 more decades, well past the time in which you and I are even still on this earth, but that we can keep that mission there indefinitely.
Well, one of the criteria that I think gives Meridian an advantage to Air Force Base there is something you wouldn't normally think about necessarily, but it's hangar size. We have the hangar size there to handle these planes, right?
We do. You know, the hangar would have to be expanded a small amount, but currently, you know, we have a hangar there that 2 KC-135s can sit in the hangar simultaneously. That's extremely rare. Many bases don't have hangar facilities at all. Those that do can probably only house 1. Our hangar was built to house 2. The KC-46 is a little bit longer, so there would need to be some minor renovations done to extend that hangar just briefly, a small amount, Dave. But, you know, that's something that makes us unique. You know, the other thing is, you know, we've seen a recent investment by our state legislature. The governor, lieutenant governor, the state legislature recently approved $20 million to build a new crash fire station there at Keyfield. That's going to help make us extremely competitive. And look, it was great to see local leaders like the mayor, the board of supervisors. We had 2 state senators, 2 state representatives who were there. We had representatives from the Meridian Naval Air Station, from the Sonny Montgomery Foundation. there is a groundswell of community support for this project, and that's what we want to make sure that we are communicating with the decision makers in the Air Force, that not only do we have the facilities, physical facilities, that we already have the personnel, but we've got a community that is hungry for the 46th to come to Meridian.
And this will bring a big economic impact to the state and to the Meridian area if we are designated one of these two locations, right?
It will. In talking with the colonel there, who is the commander of that air base, she believes, based on some of the briefings, that there could be as many as 100+ additional personnel that would accompany this new aircraft. And so that would be potentially 100 new families moving into the Meridian, Lauderdale County, East Mississippi area. And so this will be able to bring additional families there, and it will create that economic development. When asked by some of the media, what would it cost to be able to begin flying this mission here in Meridian? And the base commander said that for as little as $5 million, we're prepared to take on these new planes and start flying this mission. And so if you look at a cost efficiency to the federal government, to the Air Force, Mississippi can perform this mission. We can receive these planes, and for just a very small fraction of what we spend here in D.C., we can begin flying this mission for the Air Force.
I'm going to blame you for this because you mentioned spending money in D.C., which transitions us perfectly into the next topic. And I'm just going to ask you right up front, in your opinion, is the government shutting down Saturday night?
Yes, in my opinion, it will shut down. I think the question is not will there be a government shutdown, but the question that we should begin asking now is how long will that government shutdown last? You mentioned the fact that our federal spending runs out midnight Saturday night. As we look at this new fiscal year starting October 1st, we do not have the spending bills passed out of the House and Senate to fund the government. And so we're in the process, at least on the House side, of working on those spending bills this week. On the floor this week, we are debating and offering amendments to 4 spending bills: the defense bill, the Homeland Security bill, the ag bill, and the state and foreign ops bill. We've already passed off the House floor veterans and military construction. Those two were looped together in a single spending bill. So the hope is that by the end of the weekend, or when we get to the weekend, the House will have passed roughly half of the spending bills. At this point, I believe the Senate has passed none of their spending bills off the Senate floor. We were here till voting last night until 1 o'clock. Vote times tonight, we're scheduled to be here till at least midnight. So we're going to have several long days in Washington, D.C. as we try to advance the spending bills. But even by advancing these bills, there's going to be a need at some point to pass some sort of spending resolution to keep the government operating until these bills can be go to conference with the Senate and we can come out with a final spending package. There's been several plans that have kind of been battered around. The one that I think has gained the most support in the House would be a short-term government spending resolution, keeping the government open for 30 days. Attached along with that would be spending cuts across the board, roughly of 8%. And I say roughly across the board because we're exempting military, veterans, and Homeland, but all the other agencies would be cut 8% or more. So the other 9 areas of spending would be cut by 8%. And then we would also have language in there that would require the administration to secure the border. And I don't know if you've been following, and I'm sure you have, Dave. I know Fox News just had live coverage from Eagle Pass, Texas. We've seen that the border has once again exploded with immigrants flowing across. As many now as 9,000 a day, based on some recent numbers that came out from the administration, not including the month of September, whose numbers aren't in. we've once again set a record number of immigrants who have illegally come into our country again this year. So if you look at the record of this administration, the last year, the Trump administration, there were roughly 645,000 illegal immigrants that came in. In Biden's 3 years in office, that number went from 650 to 1.9 million. It jumped from 1.9 million to 2.7, and we're already at 2.8 with the September numbers not included. So, you're looking at the fact that we're going to be very close to that number, going to be close to 3 million. And so this administration's not fixed the border, and so if we're going to pass some sort of spending bill, I think the number one priority of the Republican caucus is to put requirements in that spending bill that force this administration to finally address that problem.
We're up against a break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion with Congressman Michael Guest on Middays live in the Element Wealth Studios on a Wednesday morning. Keep it here. And on the phone from Washington, D.C., you got to put the R in there if you're going to be Mississippi about it, Congressman Michael Guest. And we're talking about some really late nights and a long week for you and the rest of the folks in the House of Representatives. But there's something that you said. I know that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is planning to introduce a continuing resolution, as you were talking about, to give us a 30-day window to get some of this worked out. I think the question a lot of people has is why do we wait to the last second to take care of these things? Why does it always seem to be a big rush right at the last minute? Why can't we work on this kind of thing earlier? I've heard that question from a lot of people. I'm just curious as to your thoughts on it.
I wish I had a good answer for that, Dave. I mean, it seems to be historically that we as Congress have a difficult time passing our spending bills on time. I know that the House Appropriations Committee, I serve on that committee, that we marked up at least 10 of our 12 spending bills very early, giving plenty of time for those bills to be debated, amended, and voted on the floor. Part of the reason is twofold this time. One is there was a delay in getting some of that process done as the debt ceiling was being negotiated between the Speaker and the White House. That set some top-line numbers that we needed to have before we could begin that process. And then, we've also seen that we've had a rough time up until this week getting some of these bills on the floor. And so we've finally been able to move this process along. And I think it's important that we get these spending bills, which I spoke of earlier, off the floor this weekend, voted on. And then that we be back here next week continuing to do the people's business. We did see that the Senate has introduced their continuing resolution. That bill contains no cuts. It's level funding. It's for, if I'm not mistaken, a 45-day window. It contains additional funds in there for disaster relief and Ukrainian spending. I tell you that bill is a no-starter in the House. There is no way that that bill will hit the floor. It will not be considered by the House of Representatives based on everything that I've heard. And I'll just tell you that I would not be voting to support what the Senate is attempting to jam the House with. Republicans were elected to do two things: cut spending and secure our border. And we're going to make sure that as Republicans that we honor that promise that we made to the American people when they elected us. And the way to do that is to use this appropriations process to force those changes. And that's what I think the Speaker and the large majority of the Republicans are trying to do as we try to find a way to accomplish those goals and to buy some additional time as our spending bills work their way through the House and Senate and ultimately to conference where those differences will be worked out.
Well, there's a lot of middle ground between what the Senate thinks is a good deal and what the House thinks is a good deal. That's obvious to anybody that's paying attention to it. There is some talk. Do you think there are enough votes to get a continuing resolution passed through? That one that the speaker is talking about, I think he said Friday he might be the day that he introduces that. Do we have the votes to get that passed in the House?
We don't at this time. Republicans have a 4-seat majority. There's at least 5 Republican members who have openly said that they will not support any continuing resolution, regardless of what may be contained in that resolution. And so if all 5 of those Republicans hold true to their pledge not to support a continuing resolution in any shape, form, or fashion, then the resolution that the Speaker is attempting to bring to the floor would fail. The fear is that if we get into a protracted government shutdown, that a small number of House Republicans could sign off on what's known as a discharge petition and would require a bill to be brought to the floor, and that you could have a bill passed by Democrats and 8 to 10 Republicans, which would reopen the government more in line with what we're seeing the Senate asking for. Again, clean CR with no spending cuts to any agencies, and would probably also include in there funding for the Ukraine. So this is a very tenuous moment within the House Republican caucus as we're trying to work together, but knowing that there are people that, one, say that they'll never support CRs, and there's also others who are people who were elected as Republicans, but they are elected out of districts that President Biden carried last presidential election, that at least have indicated that they're willing to consider working with Democrats and to reopen government with no strings attached.
Congressman Michael Guest, try to take a few minutes here and just go grab a nap real quick in the office. You know, you're going to need it this week, I think.
The coffee will be flowing, no doubt about that.
And hopefully strong. Congressman Michael Guest, appreciate your time, appreciate the job you're doing. Keep up the good work, okay?
Thank you, buddy. Have a great day.
You too. News from Fox and SuperTalk Mississippi News up next. And then hour number 2 of Middays with Dr. John Mitchell joining us.